It. We're beginning with our next session, which is titled Looking into the Corridors of Power and Conversation with Syeda Abida Hussain. And of course, the book launch of her much talked about book, Power Failure, the Political Odyssey of a Pakistani Woman. We have two moderators for this session. One is, of course, the well-known Dr. Hamida Khuhro, who's a renowned historian and public figure. She was educated at Oxford, Cambridge, and London, and she's taught at multiple universities and written multiple books on the subject. And with her is, of course, Mr. Irshad Abdul Kadir, who is a lawyer and an English language author who lives in Karachi. And he's a graduate of Cambridge University and a barrister of law who's practiced in Pakistan as well as from other countries. So without much ado, Mr. Irshad Abdul Kadir sir.
To the remarks of this session on the book Power Failure by Syeda Abida Hussain will be made by her lifelong friend, Dr. Hamida Khuhro. So I'm going to yield to her to speak first.
My dear friend, Syeda Abida Hussain, has been at the heart of Pakistani politics for nearly 50 years, 45. Yes. It's been my privilege and great enjoyment to have known her for many, many years. My voice is coming across, I hope. Yes. One of her great talents is a gift for friendship, which shows in a great network of friends all over the world. Her interest in people stands her in good stead in getting support and love also of her constituents, which is proved by her being elected from multiple seats for many sessions of the Parliament. In writing her magisterial volume of memoirs, she has added greatly to the historic source material of this country and made the task of the historian easier. The volume is all the more valuable because of a very impressive detailed recall of the events she is describing. She's been privy to behind-the-scenes stories of many important events, and in this book we are privileged to share her memories and knowledge. In the course of the next hour, I hope to put a lot of questions to Abida and hear her narrative in her inimitable style. Now, I know that my co-moderator is anxious to make his remarks, so over to you, Irshad. I hope I was within 3 minutes.
Thank you, Hamida. Syeda Abida Hussain, fondly known as Chando by her family and Chandi by her friends, is known to many of you and to people all over Pakistan as one of the iconic figures of this country. It struck me while I was reading this book that she is the same vintage as the nation. She is the same vintage as the nation, born a year earlier and here with us today as the nation is. So, she was born in a tradition, religio-feudal family. She was raised on a farm in Jhang and in her family home in Lahore, educated at that bastion of British colonialism, Queen Mary's in Lahore. And then she went to a Swiss finishing school and rounded off by a year studying fine arts and architecture in Florence. The book suggests that on her return home, her commitment to Pakistan seemed to crystallize. Thereafter, her interests, her energies and endeavors were geared towards service of the state in some form or another. This is not completely certain when she came in, but this is what she gravitated towards gradually as it went. Now, much of the commitment was instilled by an exemplary father who led by example of his loyalty to the Pakistan of Qaid-e-Azam, and also by a devoted mother who was very much of the same thinking as her husband. Now, subsequent steps that Chandi has taken, she attests to her being a representation of the positivism inherent in Pakistan. All her steps have gravitated in that direction. There is not an element of anything which is destructive or anything which is defeatist. It's a positive, triumphant kind of moment. She did the traditional things. She married a cousin, as her family expected, Fakhr Imam, who is, the two cousins were drawn together and married and have had a very successful marriage. He has also, after marriage, led his own distinguished career alongside his wife, and they have been partners at home and, in a sense, partners in politics also, supportive of each other. Now, this pair, Fakhr Imam and Abida, have been viewed by no less a person than Benazir Bhutto as the ideal couple in public life. She called them the ideal couple in public life, and they have stood out as that. Now, the story could end there, that the ideal couple in married life with their three wonderful children and their homes in Jhang, Lahore and Islamabad lived happily ever after. But that's not what happened. That seems to be just the beginning. Because the operative part of Chandi's life seems to begin in 1970. And after that, it has carried on for approximately 40 years thereafter. In 1970, she joined PPP, Mr. Bhutto's PPP, and and one of the things, this is interesting, one of the things he asked her at that time was, he wondered about how her Westernism allowed her to live in Jhang and operate within that milieu, which was so alien to the kind of cultural input that had gone into her. And here is the answer Chandi gave him, and I read from the book. The value of a good education is that it teaches one to become less, not more adaptable, Prime Minister. I have no problem managing in Jhang. I belong there. I love the land and the people. I have broken with tradition in some ways and upheld it in others. It is a male-dominated society, but women like me will prove that if we work hard enough, we can elevate ourselves to achieve and score. And I think that has been her kind of driving force all through since then. What else can I tell you about her? She got into assembly in 1972, the provincial assembly first. She was nominated on a reserved women's seat for the PPP, but that is the first and the last time she took a seat in the assembly on that basis. After that, she's contested elections on her own, and she's contested them not on any reserved seats, and she contested them against male opponents and succeeded. I think in all her national elections, she's won 3 of them, been defeated in 1, but has won 3 and got into the National Assembly on each occasion. She also had a significant role to play in local politics or local administration. She was the first lady chairman of the Jhang District Council. By the way, she was also the first elected woman who went into parliament. That's a historical reality. So she has been a minister. She became a minister also in caretaker governments and finally in the Nawaz Sharif government in his last government before this one. And also the significant thing is that in 91 to 93, her services were recognized and she went off to the United States as ambassador, where her great role and achievement, I think, was trying to convince the Americans to release what was due to us from them. So, you know, this lady has had a very positive effect and a very positive role to play in Pakistan. Her friends, she's had many friends, as you read in the book, and they're notable people and lesser people in Pakistan, abroad. She's associated with ministers, prime ministers, generals, presidents, martial law administrators, generals, judges, and then many people abroad, including royalty, celebrities, and so on and so forth. So she has a vast concourse of people whom she is associated with. Now, there are one or two things I need to say about her politics. She has been in different governments. She has joined different parties at various stages. But her role has always been pro-democracy. She has always supported the democratic ideal, and she has struggled and fought for it. There is an instance when General Yahya wanted to pass the 8th Amendment to the Constitution, and she, along with I think 6 or 7 other members, refused to sign it. She's down on record as refusing to sign that. Thereafter, she has tried to promote a kind of rapprochement, facilitate a rapprochement between Nawaz Sharif and Benazir Bhutto when she was alive, to enable the democratic exercise to go on in Pakistan. And this, as you probably know, resulted in what was known as the Charter of Democracy, which was signed in London between these two personages, and later on signed by Chandi and Fakhr Imam too. So there is this aspect too of her involvement. I think the important thing to say about her is that despite all these different roles she has played, she is quintessentially Pakistani. That is what this lady is. She's quintessentially Pakistani. Not a little bit of this, or a little bit of that, or a little bit of the other, but quintessentially Pakistani. Now, she has come to the point where she says, by the way, she's also had association with several historic events in this country, either because she was there, or she was there by association. These include martial law declarations, dissolutions of the National Assembly, the attack that took place on Benazir Bhutto's procession when it came into Karachi, where she herself was wounded. She's been involved, or at least associated with, the assassinations of Akbar Bukti and Benazir Bhutto. So this is a very full life, right? She has decided for some reason to hang up the shingle. In legal terms, it means to give up politics. Whether she carries through with this or not, I don't know. Her next generation, her daughter, is in politics and will probably carry on the tradition. I'll just say one thing more and then go back to Hamida and possibly to Chandi, whom we really should hear from. She says, many of the young I encounter want to know what Pakistan was like during my youth. I tell them it was a better place, far less crowded, and there was greater hope for the future. Bittersweet memories. What is important is that when we look back, we should be able to feel that we have spent life meaningfully, that we have made contribution to the betterment of the country and in alleviating the suffering of others. Important too is how we negotiate that passage and what we contribute to life as we go along. My friends, Syeda Abida Hussain.
I think, Chandi, we've had a very full account of your career from Irshad. But if I may, I would like to go back to the beginning and ask you, what was it like not being a son in your of your father? Was that at all something that you were aware of and thought about? And B, how did you get into politics?
Well, as you know, Hamida, you would have a recall of my late father. He was an only child, and coming from a very traditional background, it was considered extremely important for him to be the father of sons. But my mother failed to produce another child other than myself. And my father defied all tradition and would always quote the example of the Holy Prophet of Islam and say to me that you're as good as a son would have been. And he always addressed me as beta. So I kind of grew up without really any sense of gender, and I grew up with the determination that I would do all of the things that my father did. And my father was a great horse lover, so the very first day that I started walking, he picked me up and put me in a saddle to ride a horse, to ride a pony. And I rode horses for a long time and have been breeding horses ever since, as my late father did. So I really grew up feeling, I was a woman obviously, but did not feel any great restrictions having a pair of very supportive parents. Politics, Hamida, as you know, really came to me after my father died. He died relatively young, at age 55. And I felt that somehow he had left a lot of his work unfinished. And I had a calling to finish his work. So I have tried. It's been a long story. It's had its ups and its downs. But also I've had very many opportunities. And I've written somewhere in my narrative that when I went to present credentials at the White House, very conscious of the fact that not only was I the first woman ambassador from Pakistan to the United States, but also that I was the first Muslim woman to be presenting credentials in the White House. I had the privilege of having my daughters accompany me, because the credentials presentation is something of a ritual, and the ambassador is expected to take their family members with them. Fakhr Imam and my son were in Pakistan at the time. Abid was still in school, and Fakhr was in fact in the cabinet. But my daughters, Kulsum and Suhra, whom we call Umku and Shugu, were both at Harvard as undergraduates, a year apart. And so I had asked them to come down, and they accompanied me to the White House. And as we were driving there, I said to them, don't ever forget that you owe this to Pakistan. Had you not been born Pakistani, you would not be driving in this limo into the White House and about to shake hands with the President of the United States. So you owe your country, and you are expected by me and by your father to come back and to work for Pakistan. So that was the sort of feeling, even well before I reached Washington, that I always had, that this country had given me the best that it possibly could, and I owed it. I owed a great deal back to my country, and that really shaped the thrust of my politics. If I may take a moment to say that a lot of people ask me, particularly from the media, why I have changed so many parties. I say to them that my friend Kulsum, late Kulsum Saifullah, used to say, I joined the government, and if the government changes, it's not my fault. I'm with every government. So I would say I think an improvement on that. I have a set of political values, I think in liberal terms, and I believe in the democratic construct. So if a party has a liberal orientation and has had a democratic record, then I will be in that party. And I started with the Pakistan People's Party. I left it because late Mr. Bhutto, quite surprisingly, did not confer a party nomination for a general seat to me, and telephoned me and said, you can come in on a woman's seat. And I said, Mr. Chairman, the party manifesto says that there will be no bias on the basis of gender. And I've worked very hard, and I'll bring the constituency in for the party. But he denied me that opportunity, and so I left the Pakistan People's Party on course of the 1977 elections. And then I joined the National Democratic Party led by Sardar Sherbaz Mazari with Begum Naseem Wali Khan as its leading light. I heard Naseem Bibi in a jalsa, and I felt that, well, she won't deny me a ticket from a general seat. And then the NDP manifesto was really very, very similar to that of the Pakistan People's Party. Sadly, 2 years after I had joined the NDP split. Mir Ghosbakhsh Bazenjo and Sardar Ataullah Mengal formed the Baloch National Party, and Khan Abdul Wali Khan established the Awami National Party. They were both kind, they both asked me to join their respective parties, but since I belonged to the Punjab heartland, it was very difficult for me to make a choice between a Pashtun organization and a Baloch organization. So I decided to remain independent. Now, I remained independent for 15 years, and I've been elected 3 times to the National Assembly of Pakistan, twice as an independent. So this 15-year span actually is the longest single episode in the course of my political journey. And I must remind Irshad that actually I won 3 elections and I've lost 4, not 2. Anyway, I remained independent and then joined the Pakistan Muslim League led by Nawaz Sharif in 1990, because Nawaz was trying to liberalize, struggling to liberalize, and Khuhro and I both genuinely thought that we would kind of be able to help him to move in a more liberal direction. We were with Nawaz Sharif till he left for Saudi Arabia. And because he did not really consult his party, after he left, the rump of the party, because we were suspended MNAs, decided to regroup as the Pakistan Muslim League, which came to be known as Q, a rather dreadful memory now. But anyway, we remained with that organization until Mia Azhar led it, and when he was set aside, we decided to opt out. Again, we remained independent for 4 years, and then Benazir Bhutto and I formed a kind of friendship. They say the best kinds of friendships are those where you have common adversaries. So we looked upon Pervez Musharraf as a common adversary and became friends, and then we joined the Pakistan People's Party in 1996 and remained in the party till the party had any use for us. I'm out of politics. I've had a great time and no regrets, and now it's up to my children to carry the story forward.
Well, Chandri, I was going to ask you why you joined the PPP of all parties, but you did, and you've explained it in detail as to your motivations. But I want to know, I mean, you are opposed to authoritarianism. You're opposed to all these dictatorial tendencies that we have in politics. How was it, what did you think of ZAB?
Well, Hamida, you knew him as perhaps better than I did, coming from Larkana. ZAB had a charming side to him, and he had a rough side to him. I was fortunate insofar as I encountered personally just the charming side. He was very kind, very gracious to me. He supported me when I was bereft. My father had died, my male relatives were not exactly supportive or friendly, and I was very much on my own, desperate to somehow try and paddle my own canoe in Jhang. And Mr. Bhutto gave me a nomination for the Punjab Assembly from a seat reserved for women. I interacted with him perhaps 4 times, and on each occasion he was kind. So that was my experience. But of course I was aware, particularly when he banned the nap and threw Khan Abdul Wali Khan and Sardar Ataullah Mengal, Mir Ghaus Bakhsh Bisenjo, Nawab Khair Bakhsh Mari into a treason case in jail in Hyderabad. Of course, one understood that he had a very rough side to him, but personally, I did not encounter it.
Right. Although you must have been well aware of what he was doing in the country anyhow.
I have a question, Chandra, and that is this, that when the storming of the Supreme Court took place under one of the Nawaz Sharif dispensations, and you held office at that time, why did you not walk away from that government at that point?
Very good question, Irshad. I was actually, I arrived in my office, which was in the cabinet block at the time, and my staff told me that the Supreme Court was under attack. So I went out onto the balcony, and when I saw what was happening, I burst into tears.
Yes, so you said.
Now, both Fakhr and I and many of our colleagues persuaded Nawaz Sharif to go into the court to apologize. But he failed to do so. And this episode was in February. I was deeply embarrassed and very uncomfortable, and I resigned from his cabinet in May of 1999.
Was this the main reason why you resigned?
No, it wasn't. But because of my deep discomfort and at the storming of the Supreme Court, and because of the Prime Minister having an awareness of it, I was accused of stealing electricity from a tube well on my farm.
Of course.
And I wasn't served a detection bill, and an FIR was lodged against me, so I decided to resign and took the matter to court and was eventually exonerated of the accusation.
Yes.
And you were a Minister for Population Planning, and I know that you were extremely involved and cared about the subject. Did you think that you made any difference? Were you able to follow any policies that would work for Pakistan?
Hamida, I have always remained very acutely aware of our demographic disaster. And so when I had the opportunity, we developed a plan which was actually very practical. We decided to emphasize the surgical method, both vasectomies as well as tubectomies, because we found that other contraceptive materials were not really used with any degree of regularity by the majority of our women clients. But the ghastly thing was that there was a demand for family planning, and government was able to address only 60% of the demand. So 40% of the demand remained unaddressed. And then we would get all our contraceptive materials donated to us by USAID. 1990, when the Pressler law came into effect, USAID cut off all assistance, including assistance to population planning. So as minister, I had to travel to somehow replace that assistance that we had lost. And I was successful with the British, the European Union, and Japan coming in to fill that gap somewhat. And then I was able to motivate Nafis Sadek to increase the grant that we were getting from the UNFPA. So that was one part of the story. The other part of the story was that we made a plan that we categorize our clients, and women who have had a male child as the firstborn should immediately be targeted, and whether she had a daughter or a son, be persuaded to go in for a tubectomy after her second child. And then if she had a daughter as the first child, but a son as the second child, so this looked after, since nature makes a gender balance, this looked after the entire fertile population of women. So where in the case where she had a daughter and then a son, we would try and motivate her. In the case of two daughters, we would kind of leave her alone for until the third option, and so on. So we worked, the ministry became quite energetic, and there was a tradition that good officers, well-reputed or highly rated officers, did not want to go into the what we call now population welfare ministry or departments. So I had to struggle to get better officers, and eventually did get a good team. And then, you know, we, with more energy, we were able to mobilize the program. I'm very proud of the fact that we came down. We were populating at a rate of 2.2%. When I came into the ministry in a 2-year period, we came down to 2%. I got good support from the Prime Minister, less support from the Cabinet, and eventually, when I left the program kind of de-energized. And the two segments that we've had of governance, the first time by General Ziaul Haq and the second time by General Pervez Musharraf, this was an issue which was very, very rarely discussed, became low priority, and this really, the two segments are 20 years, and this is the 20 years that we hit population momentum. And we're still in that state where we're evasive of the issue, and it is really at the source of all, I believe, of all our problems.
How much of all this is still in continuation?
Well, some of it is. During the Musharraf time, they decided to reduce the government's involvement in the subject and to divert it more into NGOs. And some NGOs have been reasonably effective, others less so. But there's very little discussion on the issue. It's low priority as compared to the overall importance of the issue.
I have another question, which is as follows. Why did you choose this title, Chandi? Many people ask this. Why power failure?
Well, you know, because Irshad, I believe that the story of Pakistan is the story of a failure in the exercise of power. I believe that we have done extremely well in many areas. I believe that the Pakistani people are resilient, patient, gifted in many ways. But somehow we fail to get our act together because we really don't know how to handle power. And this is so in the private sector very often. This is so even in the NGOs, and certainly this has been so with the succession of governments. So because of frequent electricity breakdowns and sweating it out, the title occurred to me, and it seems to be okay.
It is, yeah. And would you equate that with a failure of leadership generally?
Yes, broadly speaking, it has been a failure of leadership. Leadership, as we all know, is about building teams. And all of us are very individualistic. So while we're very good working in an individual capacity, very often we fail to develop a team.
Can I ask you about Washington? You were, as you said, the first Muslim woman ambassador there. How did you find it? You're the only one who made President Clinton and Mrs. Clinton laugh at the inauguration. And then I just want to know generally your impressions, how you got on Washington, how did you make yourself felt in that very difficult situation?
Well, you know, Washington is a very engaging place socially. Now, there were two interesting realities that I was having to face. One was that the ambassador of India was somebody who was called Syeda Abida Hussain. He was from Hyderabad, Deccan, an absolutely charming gentleman, came from the Indian Administrative Service, had been Commerce Secretary of India, and then was sent as ambassador. And actually he established the base for the Indo-American commercial relationship, which is in full bloom now. So Syeda Abida Hussain of India and Syeda Abida Hussain of Pakistan, I was very often, wherever I went, I'd have somebody or the other, some American, say, "Oh, we just met your wonderful husband." And he, poor man, was very often said to him very often that they had just met his wonderful wife. So this was a big laugh. But aside from this, very often when I went to call on senators and congressmen, always accompanied by my deputy chief of mission, my good friend Sarwar Naqvi, the representative and the most notable one was Senator Albert Gore, who put his hand forward to Naqvi and said, "Hello, Ambassador." So I sort of tried to lift up my 5 feet of height and said, "Excuse me, Senator, I'm Ambassador. Mr. Naqvi is my Deputy Chief of Mission." So the senator said, "Oh, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so sorry. I've been running all day. I haven't had time to read your papers. I do apologize." So I said, "Well, Senator, now that you're nice and guilty, maybe we'll get another 15 minutes of your time." And we did, and we had a great conversation. Now, a few months later, Senator Gore became the candidate for vice president on the side of the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party were having their convention in New York. Fakhr Imam came to join me for a few days for the convention. So we were being presented, the diplomatic corps was being presented to the vice president candidate. And this time he put his hand out to Fakhr Imam and said, "Ambassador, how nice to meet you." So I said, "Excuse me, Senator, I'm ambassador. And he looked at me and he said, oh God, I've done it again. Don't tell the press. Don't tell the press. I'll be done. I'll be cooked. Don't tell the press. So I said, all right, Senator, I will not tell the press. But you know as an American that there ain't no free lunch. So you promise me that you will visit Pakistan when you're elected vice president. He said, you know, I have a feeling that if I don't keep the promise, you'll catch up with me. So I will promise you that Pakistan will be one of the first lot of countries that I will visit. So we left it at that. Now the Democrats won the election, and I was now having to, the diplomatic corps was being presented to President Clinton and Vice President Gore. President Clinton opted to meet with all of us in his old alma mater in Georgetown University. So we arrived, it was freezing cold. We arrived at the campus of Georgetown, and there I encountered the second Muslim woman ambassador assigned to Washington, Rosa. I forget the surname. Rosa was from Kyrgyzstan, and she came 6 months after I did. So she held her hand out to me and said, I'm Rosa, I'm first Muslim woman ambassador in Washington. I said, no, Ambassador, you're the second. So she looked at me and she said, why don't you drop dead? But Rosa and I in the end became good friends. Anyway, so now we're queuing up to meet with the president and the vice president. And so the Clintons, both President Bill Clinton as well as Hillary, shake my hand as I move up, and both look deep into my eyes. This was a great Clinton trick. And then I moved to Vice President Gore and to Tipper Gore. And Vice President Gore says to me, Ambassador, I'm not going to make the mistake a third time. I said, Mr. Vice President, congratulations. And you can't. There is no man accompanying me at the moment. So he laughed, and Tipper leaned over and she said, you know, Al has told me about his blunder, and I'm dying, and he's told me about the promise he's made to you, and I'm dying to come to Pakistan. So at this point, Hillary leaned forward and said, what are you guys talking about, and why are you laughing so much? So the story was narrated to the Clintons, who had a good laugh. And Hillary said, oh, Al, how could you? And twice. Really dumb. And we were all laughing. So as I moved on, my colleagues, of course, were full of curiosity as to how I had managed to keep the new leadership engaged for a few moments. So this went on. But my pièce de résistance on Sarwar being mistaken as the ambassador was after the presidential election and the congressional election. A congressman from Florida, one of my colleagues in the embassy informed me, was tipped to be Secretary of State. So we asked to see him. And when Sarwar and I walked into his office, I looked at him and he looked really ancient. Didn't quite look credible as a potential Secretary of State. Anyway, I started gabbling on about our issues with the United States. And he looked at Sarwar and he said, Ambassador, your wife sure is pretty, but she talks too much. So this was the fun part of the story. Of course, the rough part of the story was that every single American official or representative that we met would say, roll back your nuclear program, roll back. And this was the hard part.
Can I, before I hand over again to Irshad, can I just ask you about Princess Diana? Everybody would like to know, what you thought of her, what was she like, and so that it's one of your sort of what, Hollywood moments or what?
Well, when High Commissioner Nicholas Barrington informed me that he had requested for me to accompany Princess Diana when she came as Princess of Wales. Princess Diana came to our country 3 times. The first time she came as the Princess of Wales, and then when she ceased to be the Princess of Wales after the divorce, she came as Jemima and Imran Khan's guest to fundraisers for the Shaukat Khanum Hospital to Lahore. Anyway, the first time when she came as the Princess of Wales, I was with her for 4 days. And she was a very, of course, beautiful girl, great clothes horse. She had a body on which clothes sat very well. She was extremely vain. She brought with her 60 photographers and 2 journalists. So that's where her priority was. And when we were driving from the airport into Islamabad, she said to me, will I be meeting Imran Khan? So I said, well, Your Highness, you would have done, but he's playing cricket in Australia at the moment. So, but you must be knowing him. She said, no, I've never met him before. My sister-in-law, Lady Sarah Ferguson, knows him very well, and she likes him enormously. And, I really wanted to meet him. Now, I haven't written this in the book, but I'm going to mention it. I really want to meet him because somehow I feel he's very spiritual. So I looked at her and I said, Your Highness, you mean physical? So she laughed. But then she was formal the first day and then she relaxed the second day. And of course we were taking her to Chitral and to Peshawar and bringing her to Lahore and then back in Islamabad. Very busy schedules all the time. So the second thing that she said, which was a little amazing, she said, I have very difficult in-laws. And my husband does not love me. And I really don't know what to do because I do love my Harry and my Willie. So you seem like a wise person. What should I do? So I said to her, Your Highness, you have everything that any woman anywhere in the world can ever desire. Do not throw it away for something essentially ephemeral, this thing we call love. Don't do it. And she looked at me and she sighed, but she didn't respond. But Diana was essentially a sweet girl, very, very warm-hearted. She was very moved when she saw distress. But essentially what the language of our children's generation would be described as flaky. But of course, Pakistanis, everywhere we went absolutely crazy over her. And everybody wanted to see her, shake hands with her, exchange words with her, etc. So that was an aspect of my country that in some ways even surprised me, and I found it very charming.
Our time is about to come to an end. In fact, I think it has. I'm being signed to by the people in the wings. Before we finish, I do want to ask Syeda Abida one question and then we will all, terminate. Please identify.
Won't we have it interactive?
Yes. Would you like to ask them questions?
Yes, maybe people from the audience would like to.
Are there any questions?
Can I ask?
Yes, please.
My name is.
Excuse me. I think I asked first. Ladies first, anyway. Yes. Very interesting. Just tell me, after listening to all these interesting anecdotes, when they came to the crunchy part and the difficult part about rolling back the nuclear arsenal, what did you have to say?
Well, what I would usually say would be, which is what the government had mandated me to say, which was that if you're willing to give us nuclear cover, as you have done to Japan, then we would roll back our nuclear program. But if you are not willing to do that, then so long as India, with whom we have an adversarial relationship, is pursuing her nuclear program, we will pursue ours. And if that makes the United States uncomfortable, unhappy, distressed, so be it. And we stuck to our guns.
My name is Jahan Zeeb, and I have the question as a past diplomat of Pakistan. Since so many years, I very confused which kind of diplomats we posted in foreign countries. Sometimes they are admirals, sometimes they are retired generals. If you just see our neighbor India, they always have the civil servant, boys, young youth, trained as a seasoned diplomats. So this is always very confused. Why we will not put and train the seasoned diplomats in my embassies and consulate all over the world?
Well, to be honest, I had a similar opinion before I worked with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think on the whole, Pakistan's diplomatic effort is strong. It's one of the better aspects of our management of our issues. Some of our personnel in the Foreign Office are not great. And some of our retired folk from different organizations have achieved distinction and do very well. We have the occasional political appointee. On the whole, these are carefully selected and do not perform badly. I believe that Pakistan's diplomatic effort is actually not out of place. But you see, diplomacy will not take you beyond the internal condition of your country. So diplomacy is only going to reflect what's happening in your country. If we are feeling comfortable and good about ourselves, then our diplomacy is going to be effective. And if we're feeling like we're on a downslide, then diplomacy is not going to be effective.
Well, thank you, ma'am. I am Professor Akbar Haider Sumro, former Vice Chancellor Shahid Mehtarma Benazir Bhutto Medical University, Ladkana. I want to know about your own opinion about the power failure in a way that there was 58(2)(b), which was scrapped by politicians, and that's the 8th Amendment. How do you feel about if the 58(2)(b) would have been there? It could have just given us some boost for the power in this. Or there's what's your opinion, personal opinion about? Because there should be some check and balance in the politicians as well. Thank you very much.
Well, as Irshad Abdul Kadir mentioned, in 1986, I was one of the 8 members who did not sign on the 8th Amendment bill, and one of the articles that we had reservations about was Article 58(2)(b). But with all of what has happened in the intervening years, I agree with you. I think Article 58(2)(b) is a safety valve. It ensures that you go back in a fresh reference to the people. But it is, in fact, a check and a restraint against an extra-constitutional intervention. And this is why I believe that, if you listen to the gossip that goes on, again, there is conversation on the possibilities of extra constitutional movement. And that is only there because this security device is not there, the 58(2)(b). And then another thing has happened, you see, in the 20th Amendment to the Constitution, which I find really very troubling, and that is that the outgoing government and opposition are going to decide on the caretaker government to preside over future elections. So if you're not a part of the official dispensation or of the official opposition, you have no say in the formation of a caretaker apparatus, which means that your next election is also going to be questioned and disputed, perhaps even more vigorously than your last one. So I think that in the interest of democratic stability, we need to revisit the Constitution. We need to revisit the Constitution.
Hello. Yeah. Hello. I am Dr. Jaipal Chabria, President Pakistan Hindu Forum. I want, Madam, your comment on that the first Law Minister of Pakistan was Hindu, Jogendra Nath Mandal, and he was also the Labour Minister, he was also the Kashmir Affairs Minister. But it is the bad luck in our country. After that, there is no chance given to the non-Muslim patriots. As you know, the Harchandra Rai was the founder of Karachi and Jamshed Mehta was the first mayor. There is no any lesson on the non-Muslim patriots and not any opportunity given to the non-Muslims as it was given to Jogendra Nath Mandal and as it was given to S.P. Singha, who was the first speaker of the Punjab Assembly. Please give you comments on this.
Well, I appreciate your feeling, and I do believe that we should have both members of the Hindu community in Pakistan as well as members of the Parsi community in Pakistan in high-profile positions. Some people dismiss this as tokenism, but I think that tokenism can be very important at times, and particularly nowadays, there is absolutely no reason why we should not have more than one Hindu representative in a high-profile position.
Begum Sahib, coming to the Talibanization and the sectarianism that haunts our country, some owe it to the fact that it dates back to how the downtrodden and the peasants were treated in Jhang. There's a saying that it originates from Jhang, like Haknawaz, Jhangvi and Azam Tariq, they all belong to that area. And how the downtrodden were treated by your family, by Fakhr Imam Sahib's family and Faisal Saleh Hayat's family. Your comment on that, please.
Well, you know, we have what you describe as downtrodden folk everywhere in the country. We have them in Sindh, we have them in KPK, we have them in Balochistan. We have them all over Punjab, including, of course, in Jhang. Both Fakhr Imam's family and mine are what we call Pirkhanas. So at a certain level, we are very democratic also. But I have in my narrative actually traced the precise history of the sectarian issue, which led to the Sipai Sahaba being established in Jhang. And then the Lashkar Jhangvi becoming an offshoot of the Sipai Sahaba. The episode started with the Ayub Khan dispensation, when General Musa, who was a Hazara and a Shia, was governor of West Pakistan. Some miscreants wrote on what used to be known as Khiva Gate. You know, Jhang is a walled city and it has 4 gates. So the Khiva Gate was just before the 7th of Muharram, and on the 7th of Muharram there's a big procession in the city of Jhang. It was renamed Bab-e Umar. So that it was guaranteed that there would be a fight. And there was a fight. And very regrettably, 8 people of the Ahl Sunnat were killed in police firing. My father, who was always in that jalous, that particular year, because of the renaming of the gate and anticipating trouble, he was not there. He was not present in that procession. Anyway, that became a big anti-Shia issue. But in the 1970 election, when my father lost the election because of the sectarian passions that had been triggered, and because he died 2 months after the election, the feeling evaporated. Then it was planted there. In 1986, the Sipai Sahaba was created and planted there. And if you want to know more detail, you'll have to read my book.
Madam,
I think we have.
my name is Amarnath Motumal. I am president of Hindu Panchayat Karachi Division. I want your comments on the point that 58-2B is no more. It is fact. But will we survive the Taliban attacks in Pakistan?
I don't see how 58-2B is connected to the Taliban attacks. But I do believe that at the moment there is a determination in our country, there's a new resolve in our country to rid ourselves of Talibanization. And very extreme measures have been taken. So I am for one optimistic. I believe that the government and the armed forces do have the capacity to root out this extremism and terrorism, and I hope and pray that we will.
I think we've got time for just one more question. Do you want to ask a question? Have they given you a microphone? Poor lady is into
One.
But I'll ask the question anyway. I just want to know your opinion about whether you think that women have more access to corridors of power in Pakistan today.
I think women at the moment have fair opportunity. It's a question of women persevering, of working within political parties and asserting themselves and moving up into legislature, being involved in communities, developing constituencies and being able to participate in general elections. I'm frankly not very big on these reserved seats for women. And I feel that women are really not handicapped anymore if we want to, if we can balance the domestic with the professional and so on, and we want to work in the community, I think it's not that difficult.
Before we wind up, I'd like to ask you just one more question, Chandi. What have been the best moments of your life that you can think of, and the most difficult ones? If you can tell us quickly.
Irshad, I've had many good moments in my life, but I think really the best moments have been when I've had my 3 children. I think those have been the best moments.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Abida.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this session. Acha, we will resume after the lunch break, which is 1:30 to 2:30, and we will be back with our next session at 2:30 p.m. Begum Abida Hussain will be signing books at the designated stand. So if you are interested in having an author signing, please do visit. Thank you.